Morning. Thought I would try something different today. I thought I would read the chapter 3 of If Only They Could Talk, the part of by James Herriot, the first bit of the All Creatures Great and Small omnibus bit. So this is a fairly short chapter, only eight pages. So let's see if this works, and let me know how it goes. We could do it elsewhere. So chapter 3 of If Only They Could Talk. The long offshoot behind the house had been the servants' quarters in grander days. Here everything was dark and narrow and poky, as if in deliberate contrast with the front. Farnan led me to the first of several doors which opened off a passage where the smell of ether and carbolic hung on the air. "This," he said, with a secret gleam in his eye, as though he were about to unveil the mysteries of Aladdin's cave, "is the dispensary." The dispensary was an important place in the days before penicillin and the sulfonamides. Rows of gleaming Winchester bottles lined the white walls from floor to ceiling. I savoured the familiar names: sweet spirits of nitra, tincture of camphor, chlorodyne formalin, salammoniac, hexamine, sugar of lead, linamentum album, perchloride of mercury, red blister. The lines of labels were comforting. I was an initiate among old friends. I had painfully accumulated their lore, ferreting out their secrets over the years. I knew their origins, actions, and uses, and their maddeningly varied dosage. The examiner's voice, and what is the dose for the horse, and the cow, and the sheep, and the pig, and the dog, and the cat. These shelves held the vet's entire armoury against disease, and on a bench under the window I could see the instruments for compounding them, the graduated vessels and beakers, the mortars and pestles, and underneath, in an open cupboard, the medicine bottles, piles of corks of all sizes, pillboxes, powder papers. As we moved around, Farnan's manner became more and more animated. His eyes glittered and he talked rapidly. Often he reached up and caressed a Winchester on its shelf, or he would lift out a horse ball or an electri from its box, give it a friendly pat, and replace it with tenderness. "Look at this stuff, Herriot," he shouted without warning. "Adravan. This is the remedy par excellence for redworms in horses. Bit expensive, mind you, 10 bob a packet. And these gentian violet pessaries. If you shove one of these into a cow's uterus after a dirty cleansing, it turns the discharges a very pretty colour. Really looks as though it's doing something. And have you seen this trick?" He placed a few crystals of resublimated iodine on a glass dish and added a drop of turpentine. Nothing happened for a second. Then a dense cloud of purple smoke rolled heavily to the ceiling. He gave a great bellow of laughter at my startled face. "Like witchcraft, isn't it? I use it for wounds in horses' feet. The chemical reaction drives the iodine deep into the tissues." "It does? Well, I don't know, but that's the theory. And anyway, you must admit it looks wonderful. Impresses the toughest client." Some of the bottles on the shelves fell short of the ethical standards I had learned in college, like the one labelled Colic Drench, and featuring a floridly drawn picture of a horse rolling in agony. The animal's face was turned outwards and wore an expression of very human anguish. Another bore the legend Universal Cattle Medicine in ornate script, a sovereign remedy for coughs, chills, scars, pneumonia, milk fever, garget, and all forms of indigestion. At the bottom of the label, in flaring black capitals, was the assurance, never fails to give relief. Farnan had something to say about most of the drugs. Each one had its place in his 5 years' experience of practice. They all had their fascination, their individual mystique. Many of the bottles were beautifully shaped, with heavy glass stoppers, and their Latin names cut deeply into their sides, names familiar to physicians for centuries, gathering fables through the years. The two of us stood gazing at the gleaming rows without any idea that it was nearly all useless, and that the days of the old medicines were nearly over. Soon they would be hustled into oblivion by the headlong rush of the new discoveries, and they would never return. This is where we keep the instruments. Farnan showed me into another little room. The small animal equipment lay on green baize shelves, very neat and impressively clean. Hypodermic syringes, whelping forceps, tooth scalers, probes, searches, and, in a place of prominence, an ophthalmoscope. Farnan lifted it lovingly from its black box. "My latest purchase," he murmured, stroking its smooth shaft. "Wonderful thing. Here, have a peep at my retina." I switched on the bulb and gazed with interest at the glistening coloured tapestry in the depths of his eye. "Very pretty. I could write you a certificate of soundness." He laughed and thumped my shoulder. "Good. I'm glad to hear it. I always fancied I had a touch of cataract in that one." He began to show me the large animal instruments which hung from hooks on the walls. Docking and firing irons, bloodless castrators, emasculators, casting ropes and hobbles, carving ropes and hooks. A new silvery embryotome hung in the place of honour, but many of the instruments, like the drugs, were museum pieces, particularly the bloodstick and fleam, a relic of medieval times, but still used to bring the rich blood spouting into a bucket. "You still can't beat it for laminitis," Farnan declared seriously. We finished up in the operating room with its bare white walls, high table, oxygen and ether anaesthetic outfit, and a small sterilizer. Not much animal work in this district. Farnan smoothed the table with his palm, but I'm trying to encourage it. It makes a pleasant change from lying on your belly in a cowhouse. The thing is, we've got to do the job right. The old castor oil and prussic acid doctrine is no good at all. You probably know that a lot of the old hands won't look at a dog or a cat, but the profession has got to change its ideas. He went over to a cupboard in the corner and opened the door. I could see glass shelves with a few scalpels, artery forceps, suture needles, and bottles of catgut in spirit. He took out his handkerchief and flicked at an oroscope before closing the doors carefully. "Well, what do you think of it all?" he asked as he went out into the passage. "Great," I replied. "You've got just about everything you need here. I'm really impressed." He seemed to swell visibly. The thin cheeks flushed and he hummed softly to himself. Then he burst loudly into song in a shaky baritone, keeping time with our steps as we marched along. Back in the sitting room, I told him about Bert Sharp. Something about boring out a cow which was going on 3 cylinders. He talked about her ewer and felon. I didn't quite get it. Farnan laughed. I think I can translate. He wants a Hudson's operation doing on a blocked teat. Ewer is the udder and felon, the local term for mastitis. Well, thanks. And there was a deaf Irishman, a Mr. Mulligan. Wait a minute. Farnan held up a hand. Let me guess. Womerton. Aye, Womerton. Bad, so. Right. I'll put up another pint of bismuth carb for him. I'm in favour of long-range treatment for this dog. He looks like an Airedale, but he's as big as a donkey and has a moody disposition. He's had Joe Mulligan on the floor a few times. Just gets him down and worries him when he's got nothing better to do. But Joe loves him. How about the vomiting? Doesn't mean a thing. Natural reaction from eating every bit of rubbish he finds. Well, we'd better get out to Sharp's, and there are one or two other visits. How about coming with me and I'll show you a bit of the district? Outside the house, Farnan motioned me towards a battered hillman, and as I moved round to the passenger's side, I got a startled glance at the treadless tyres, the rusty bodywork, the almost opaque windscreen with its network of fine cracks. What I didn't notice was that the passenger seat was not fixed to the floor, but stood freely on its sledge-like runners. I dropped into it and went over backwards, finishing with my head on the rear seat and my feet against the roof. Farnan helped me up, apologising with great charm, and we set off. Once clear of the marketplace, the road dipped quite suddenly, and we could see all of the dales stretching away from us in the evening sunshine. The outlines of the great hills were softened in the gentle light, and a broken stream of silver showed where the Darrow wandered on the valley floor. Farnan was an unorthodox driver. Apparently captivated by the scene, he drove slowly down the hill, elbows resting on the wheel, his chin cupped in his hands. At the bottom of the hill, he came out of his reverie and spurted to 70 miles an hour. The old car rocked crazily along the narrow road, and my movable seat slewed from side to side as I jammed my feet against the floorboards. Then he slammed on the brakes, pointed out some pedigree short forks in a field, and jolted away again. He never looked at the road in front. All his attention was on the countryside around and behind him. It was that last bit that worried me, because he spent a lot of time driving fast and looking over his shoulder at the same time. We left the road at last and made our way up a gated lane. My years of seeing practice had taught me to hop in and out very smartly, as students were regarded primarily as gate-opening machines. Farnan, however, thanked me gravely every time, and once I got over my surprise, I found it refreshing. We drew up in a farmyard. "Lame horse here," Farnan said. A strapping Clydesdale gelding was brought out, and we watched attentively as the farmer trotted him up and down. "Which leg do you make it?" my colleague asked. "Near 4. Yes, I think so too." "Like to examine it?" I put my head on the foot, feeling how much hotter it was than the other. I called for a hammer and tapped the wall of the hoof. The horse flinched, raised the foot, and held it trembling for a few seconds before replacing it carefully on the ground. "Looks like pus in the foot to me." "I'll bet you're right," Farnan said. "They call it gravel around here, by the way. What do you suggest we do about it? Open up the sole and evacuate the pus?" "Right." He held out a hoof knife. "Oh, what's your technique?" With the uncomfortable feeling that I was on trial, I took the knife, lifted the foot, and tucked it between my knees. I knew what I had to do. Find the dark mark on the sole where the infection had entered, and follow it down till I reached the pus. I scraped away the caked dirt and found not one but several marks. After more tapping to find the painful area, I selected a likely spot and started to cut. The horn seemed as hard as marble, and only the finished little shaving came away with each twist of the knife. The horse too appeared to appreciate having his sore foot lifted off the ground, and gratefully leaned his full weight on my back. He hadn't been so comfortable all day. I groaned and dug him in the ribs with my elbow, and though it made him change his position for a second, he was soon leaning on me again. The mark was growing fainter, and after a final gouge with the knife, it disappeared altogether. I swore quietly and started on another mark. With my back at breaking point and the sweat trickling into my eyes, I knew that if this one petered out too, I would have to let the foot go and take a rest. And with Farnan's eye on me, I didn't want to do that. Agonizingly, I hacked away, and as the hole deepened, my knees began an uncontrollable trembling. The horse rested happily, his 1,500-weight cradled by this thoughtful human. I was wondering how it would look when I finally fell flat on my face when, under the knife blade, I saw a thin spurt of pus followed by a steady trickle. "There it goes," the farmer grunted. "He'll get relief now." I enlarged the drainage hole and dropped the foot. It took me a long time to straighten up, and when I stepped back, my shirt clung to my back. "Well done, Herriot." Farnan took the knife from me and slipped it into his pocket. "It just isn't funny when the horn is as hard as that." He gave the horse a shot of tetanus antitoxin, then turned to the farmer. "I wonder if you'd hold up the foot for a second while I disinfect the cavity." The stocky little man gripped the foot between his knees and looked down with interest as Farnan filled the hole with iodine crystals and added some turpentine. Then he disappeared behind a billowing purple curtain. I watched, fascinated, as the thick pall mounted and spread. I could locate the little man only by the spluttering noises from somewhere in the middle. As the smoke began to clear, a pair of round, startled eyes came into view. "By God, Mr. Farnan, I wondered what the hell had happened for a minute," the farmer said between coughs. He looked down again at the blackened hole in the hoof and spoke reverently. "It's wonderful what science can do nowadays." We did 2 more visits, one to a calf with a cut leg which I stitched, dressed and bandaged, then to the cow with the blocked teat. Mr. Sharp was waiting, still looking eager. He led us into the byre, and Farnan gestured towards the cow. "See what you can make of it." I squatted down and palpated the teat, feeling the mass of thickened tissue halfway up. It would have to be broken down by a Hudson's instrument, and I began to work the thin metal spiral up the teat. 1 second later, I was sitting gasping in the dung channel with the neat imprint of a cloven hoof on my shirt front, just over the solar plexus. It was embarrassing, but there was nothing I could do but sit there fighting for breath, my mouth opening and shutting like a stranded fish. Mr. Sharp held his hand over his mouth, his innate politeness at war with his natural amusement at seeing the vet come to grief. "I'm sorry, young man, but I ought to have told you that this is a very friendly cow. She always likes to shake hands." Then, overcome by his own wit, he rested his forehead on the cow's back and went into a long paroxysm of silent mirth. I took my time to recover, then rose with dignity from the channel. With Mr. Sharp holding the nose and Farnan lifting up the tail, I managed to get the instrument past the fibrous mass, and by a few downward tugs, I cleared the obstruction. But though the precautions cramped the cow's style a little, she still got in several telling blows on my arms and legs. When it was over, the farmer grasped the teat and sent a long white jet frothing on the floor. "Capital! She's going on 4 cylinders now."